Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, lovers and seekers. Tonight's fragment has a headline that reads, "Let me tell you something," and the body reads as follows: Nanny, nanny, boo-boo. These words unmake children and give birth to monsters. 1. The opening mockery. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, lovers and seekers. Tonight's fragment has a headline that reads, "Let me tell you something," and the body reads as follows: Nanny, nanny, boo, boo. These words unmake children and give birth to monsters. 1. The opening mockery, nanny, nanny, boo, boo. The sound of playground taunt, stripped bare of metaphor, dripping with a childish sing-song. It is a chant that does not belong to any one child, but to the collective mouth of the playground tribe. These syllables are not rational argument. They are ritualized exclusion. The mocking tone, the sing-song lilt, the repetition, all conspire to say, you are the one outside the circle, and we are all inside. It's worth noting that the taunt does not name the alleged fault. It does not have to. Its purpose is not to state a grievance, but to perform dominance. It is pure assertion of status. 2. The function of meaninglessness. This is one of the dangerous aspects of such a phrase. It does not actually contain propositional content. Nanny, nanny, boo, boo cannot be fact-checked. It is not true or false. It's pure sound in service of social positioning. Its power is in tone and context, not in semantic accuracy. Meaninglessness, in this context, is strategic. When there's nothing to refute, the targeted child has no defense but emotional resilience, which, for a child, is rarely mature enough to withstand sustained attack. The lesson this teaches early is that there exists a kind of language whose aim is not communication, but the exertion of pressure, and that such language is not bound by truth. 3. The unmaking of children. These words unmake children. This is where the fragment turns from observation to indictment. Words can build children, in the sense that affirmation, encouragement, and careful truth-telling can help construct the inner architecture of a young self. But words can also dismantle, not in a single blow, but in repeated taps on the foundation, loosening stones. The unmaking here is not about bruising self-esteem for a day. It's about altering the developmental trajectory. A child whose social experience is saturated with mocking exclusion learns to inhabit the world differently. They may internalize the outsider role, live defensively, anticipate humiliation, avoid risk. The unmaking is a structural phenomenon, a weakening of the frame before the building is even complete. 4. The ritual aspect. This kind of chant is not random. It's often rhythmic, timed, accompanied by facial expressions, group laughter, or synchronized gestures. That turns it into a kind of dark liturgy. The group participates in the symbolic casting out of the target. Even those who are not the primary mockers will join in, partly out of fear of becoming the next target. That is how such words spread through a child culture, not because they are beautiful, but because they are safe to repeat when you want to avoid becoming prey. 5. The fragment could have been written without the, and it could have read, these words unmake children, giving birth to monsters. But the presence of the and as a standalone sentence fragment acts like a beat in music. It suspends the air before the next revelation. It also makes the second clause feel like a separate consequence, not just a corollary, but a full-scale phenomenon in its own right. The and says, we are not done, something else comes of this. 6. The birth, or berth, of monsters. The fragment uses berth rather than birth. This is significant. A berth is a space made ready, a place to dock a ship, a place to settle in. The implication is that such words do not simply create monsters, but prepare a place for them to live. The monster may be latent in every human life, but it needs conditions to thrive. The playground taunt is not the monster itself. It is the laying down of the berth, the making of the harbor where bitterness, cruelty, or vengeance will later moor. By shaming a child, the group makes space for that child to grow into something twisted in response. 7. Causality and transformation. The fragment claims causality. The chant unmakes children and gives birth to monsters. That is, the destruction of innocence is not an end in itself. It creates a vacuum, and the vacuum does not stay empty. It gets filled. Children, robbed of belonging and dignity, may later become the agents of the same cruelty that formed them. This is the generational transmission of contempt, not in the familial sense, but in the culture of peer cruelty. 8. The monster's dual origin. There are two ways such a monster might form. The turned victim. The child who was targeted grows to wield the same weapons against others, perhaps with greater precision, because they know exactly where the blade cuts deepest. The enabler, the child who joined the chant to avoid becoming the target, learns that safety comes from alliance with cruelty. This, too, is a monster, one who has traded moral courage for social security. Both forms of monstrosity are products of the birth prepared in the moment of the chant. 9. Early lessons in power. This fragment points at the earliest power dynamics most humans ever experience, not with teachers, not with parents, but with peers. Children learn that group consensus can be mobilized to harm a single individual, and that the harm can be done without laying a hand on them. The chant becomes the prototype for political propaganda, for slander, for ostracism. The power of the group voice is intoxicating. It bonds those inside and brands those outside. It is an ancient mechanism, dressed in playground clothes. 10. The seduction of the mockers. Why do children join in? Because there is safety and thrill in it. It is safer to be part of the circle than to be its target. And there is a kind of low-level joy in the rhythm, the sing-song, the way the words bounce in the mouth. That is part of the cruelty. The sound is fun to say, even as it is being used as a weapon. This is an important point. Much of the language that harms most deeply is pleasurable to speak. That pleasure is a camouflage for the violence. 11. The monster's maturation. The monsters born or birthed in childhood do not remain in the playground. They grow into adult roles, into offices, relationships, leadership positions. The tactic of using empty sound to isolate and diminish others does not vanish, it is refined. An adult version of nanny, nanny, boo, boo might be corporate gossip, political smear, online trolling. The syllables change, the sing-song may drop, but the dynamic remains identical. Create an in-group by publicly diminishing someone else, and do so without making a factual claim that can be disproven. 12. The science of such words. If we treat this as a science, as the title implies, the variables are clear. Target vulnerability, young, socially dependent, still forming identity, delivery format, rhythmic, repetitive, communal, semantic load, minimal to none, avoids factual claim to sidestep rebuttal, reinforcement mechanism, laughter, group echoing, avoidance of personal targeting. Given these conditions, the result is predictably reliable. The target is diminished. The group is bonded. The conditions for later cruelty are reinforced. 13. Silence as complicity. One of the most corrosive parts of the dynamic is the role of the silent witness. The child who does not speak up, who neither chants nor defends, learns to live with the sound of cruelty in the air without moving to stop it. That normalization of cruelty is its own kind of monster, a passive one but no less real. The birth for monsters is made not only by the mockers but by those who stand nearby and decide it is not their concern. 14. The archetype of the chant. This chant is an archetype, sound without substance, group without truth, power without reason. Once internalized, it is remarkably adaptable. It can surface in marriages, in politics, in art criticism, in religion. Whenever someone seeks to diminish another without argument, the shadow of nanny, nanny, boo, boo is there. 15. Philosophical stakes. The philosophical claim here is not merely that cruelty exists, but that cruelty in language precedes moral reasoning. That is, the capacity to harm with words emerges in human beings before they can fully understand why it is wrong, which means that moral instruction often lags behind social practice. By the time a child is told that's not nice or don't say that, they have already experienced the social benefits of doing it. Ethics must compete with belonging. 16. Repair. If possible, is there a way to undo the unmaking? Possibly, but it requires an opposite ritual. Words can unmake and words can remake, but remaking requires more than countertaunts. It requires sustained affirmation, a rebuilding of trust, and sometimes years of contradiction before the inner architecture stabilizes. The monsters once given birth may resist eviction. Some will leave, some will stay, some will change form. The real danger is that the birth remains open, ready to receive the next cruelty. 17. Closing image. The fragment leaves me with two images. A child on the playground, the air vibrating with chant, feet scuffing the dirt, eyes hot with humiliation. A quiet dock, years later, where something dark and patient waits, tied to the birth prepared for it long ago. These are the same place. The playground chant is the blueprint for the harbor, and the harbor, once built, will always be ready for a ship.